You're listening to Travel Tales with Fergal.
The meal that I keep coming back to was one afternoon driving down in Northern California and coming across there was an oyster farm where they just had picnic tables up just above the water, and they had the bags of oysters in the water, and it was cold and it was windy, and it picked up the scent of the water, and the scent of the water was exactly the scent of the oyster and the flavor of the oyster. So you were like surrounded by this oyster flavor. To be so kind of surrounded by it was a total sensual experience, because everything was focused on the taste and on the smell. And I've never had a meal greater than that.
Hello, my name is Fergal O'Keefe and you're very welcome to the podcast. My guest today is Russ Parsons, who is a former food editor for the LA Times for over 20 years. Russ now lives in County Waterford in Ireland, where he writes a brilliant monthly food column for the Irish Times magazine. I have to say that this is one of the most enjoyable interviews I've done in all 3 seasons. I've always believed that food and travel are inextricably linked, and this episode is for all lovers of food and everything to do with food. Russ is a fountain of knowledge, so enjoy. Russ, you were the former food editor for the Los Angeles Times, and you were there during the time when I think it was the number 1 selling newspaper in the world at the time, wasn't it? Is that in the 90s?
It was. It was a grand time. I was the food editor or columnist. I went back and forth between managing and writing, although I always wrote for 26 or 27 years before I retired. And at one point we were in tall cotton, as they say in the United States. I think we had our Sunday circulation was like 1.4 million or something like that. And food sections, especially during the holidays, we would have food sections that would be 100 pages just for the food section alone. And so we had resources and we could do all kinds of amazing things, and that was a lot of fun. And then the fun stopped. The world changed.
So I think we need to let people know like how I actually got to know you, and I feel like I know you really well, and that's just from your Irish Times articles. So you're a columnist in the Irish Times. You do a food article, a monthly one, I think it is, and yes. Your article coincided perfectly for around the lockdown time. And because I'm a publican by trade, and the pub was shut, so I became that cliche. I started getting into cooking and baking. So then your articles coincided with that perfectly, because what you were saying was exactly what I was thinking, i.e., comfort food is what I love. So I had this idea. I went, do you know what? My family, stews and all those old Irish foods that I love, I'm going to have to start cooking them myself, because my wife really is. My kids are all into pasta and stuff like that. And then your articles, that's what they're about, I would say, comfort food and ingredients and Irish foods. And
it's been a real, it's been a wonderful experience for me, because, I wrote about food for, 30 years, maybe a little bit longer than that. And after 30 years, that was 30 years in Los Angeles. You kind of get to know, the groundwork, right? Moving to Ireland, everything's different. Or not everything is different. There's so much that's different. So in a way, it's been kind of a rebirth, because I'm still curious about food, but there wasn't as much to be curious about in Los Angeles anymore. But here, it's an opportunity to start learning fresh, and I really I love that.
Yeah, you had a great line. It was something like saying, and you suspect all immigrants, when they come to a country, have to adapt to that country.
Right. And I'm I very proudly wear the label blow in, because that's who I am. And I'm actually a second generation blow in, because I was raised in a military family. We moved every year. So that blow-in is a natural state for me. And one of the things you learn as a blow-in is that you don't expect the world around you to adapt to you. You learn to adapt to the world around you. You learn you learn to understand, and it takes you learn to hopefully you learn a little bit of a kind of humility that I'm not coming here with all of the answers. Exactly. And that was when honestly when Mary Claire pitched me Mary Claire Digby is the food editor, and when she pitched me asked me to write for her, I didn't want to do it because I told her coming from Los Angeles where everybody's a blow-in, and people usually develop very, very fixed opinions, strong and fixed opinions on what Los Angeles is about between the airport and their hotel. By the time they've arrived at the hotel, they understand everything, and they're so happy to lecture you on what. I never wanted to be that guy. I didn't want to come into Ireland and be. I thought that was really wrong to come into Ireland and presume to talk to Irish people about Irish food. But she convinced me that there was a way to do it, that I wasn't lecturing and I wasn't being the expert, but I was taking people along on an exploration, and that in a way, taking people along on that exploration was allowing them to rediscover some things for themselves. And I thought, well, it was a great sales pitch, Mary Claire. You got it.
Because that's exactly what the article is. I mean, one article, my favorite one is the one that you wrote about the Irish butcher shop. And
oh, yeah.
No exaggeration. Every time I go, even I was in Santiago in Spain last week, and I was going through the markets, and there's a whole meat section. And again, I was thinking about that article because I turned to the guy beside me and said, I feel like a kid in a candy shop here seeing all these different meats. And I love that article because, you talk about the community and the variety and the skill of the Irish butcher shop. And, it was great seeing it,
Well, and coming from the United States, where the kind of what they would call quote unquote artisanal butchers are a bit of a coming thing in very, very urban areas. Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York. A butcher shop that sold meat that came from a specific place, either they raised their own or that they knew the people who were, from one ranch where they were raising it, and where they would cut meat for you, and where of that quality, it would be you would be paying $60 a kilo or 60 euros a kilo for that kind of meat. It would be, and you would almost have to pass like a personality test that would be given by the butcher, who would be either a man or a woman with strange facial hair and tattoos on both sleeves, and it's like, are you actually worthy of this? Here it's a given. I mean, there are I singled out one butcher who's my butcher, but there are 3 or 4 great craft butchers within walking distance of my house in Waterford, and it's a done thing here that I think that some people may take for granted, and that was part of that exploration thing of saying, you guys don't know you don't know how good you've got it here.
So we are talking for ages, and the idea is to go through your locations. So I think we should start with your locations, if that's okay. I'm very excited about this, I have to say. So the first one is Umbria, if I'm right.
Umbria, yeah, it was. Umbria was a real. It was a revelation for me. First of all, I had been an Italophile for a couple of years, even to the extent of taking Italian language classes and that kind. And there was something about the cuisine that I thought spoke to me. And so my first trip to Italy was to Umbria, and first of all, there's that thing of arriving at some place that you've dreamed about for so long, which everything else is, but there was Umbria was perfect for me because it was the countryside. The food is very simple, but really, really delicious, deeply delicious in that kind of elemental way. I used to say that, like French food is about the elevation of the ingredient, and Italian food is about the celebration of the ingredient, where you just, you start out with with great tasting greens, and then you braise them in a way that actually just brings out the flavor more rather than disguising it or adding anything to it. And Umbria is also is blessed with great natural beauty, very hilly, very green, lots of history, lots of crafts. There's great De Ruta, the great pottery center is there. Really, really good wines that aren't international in style. It's a place that has a specificity, and that's something that I really like.
And I've been to Tuscany. I haven't been to Umbria, but Tuscany, is it similar? The sort of rolling hills, but less touristy?
The landscape is Umbria is basically Tuscany without the Germans or English. The landscape is very, very similar, and there's a lot of things. There are a lot of similarities. They're adjacent. But it's more, at least it seems to me to be more purely Italian rather than, and I love Tuscany, and I love Florence, and it's a great place to visit, but you get a feeling that you're kind of being catered to. This is designed for you, the tourist. In Umbria, you're dropping into, my feeling was always that I'm dropping into a community,
And Italian food, like Italian chefs, it's like they're doing the food. It's for comfort rather than to, doing a new style or to surprise you.
That's changing, and unfortunately it's changing. I think there's a real strong wave of cucina moderna, but that reminds me. I was having a conversation with somebody, a very smart Italian guy, and we were talking about the difference between restaurants in America and restaurants in Italy. And he said that, and I think it stands in for that, for modernity versus tradition. And he said that in America, chefs cook to surprise. In Italy, chefs cook to reassure. Yeah. And he said that the problem with cooking to surprise is that you can only surprise somebody with something once. So you have to keep reinventing yourself, and you can only reinvent yourself. I mean, realistically, you can only reinvent yourself at a high level so many times. He said in Italy, and if you go to Bologna, there are restaurants that have been serving one dish per day, but they've been doing it for 150 years. It's like, okay, it's Wednesday, we're going to go to so and so for bollito misto because that's what they're doing. You don't find that kind of loyalty to that tradition other places so much.
One of my probably my favorite food is spaghetti vongole, and I love going to Puglia. And like the last time I was there, essentially every day became trying to find the ultimate spaghetti vongole. So and the variety, like it's such a simple ingredients, but every restaurant was something a little bit different. It was quite amazing seeing it,
Yeah, and the thing is, and I think the thing that you probably discovered is that there is no ultimate spaghetti al vongole. It's that there are just many spaghetti al vongole. The idea that there has to be a definitive version of a dish is a very strange and very kind of, I think it's one that's foreign to most cooks, because I think if you cook, within your culture that you may be doing the same dish as your next door neighbor, but you do it differently. That's how cooking works. You may have learned a dish from your mother, but you added your own thing to it. And that's what's special about cooking, is that we start with a format, but then we bring our own selves to it, and we adapt it to the way we like it, to the way we think.
Exactly, because actually I read you said something saying, that it's all about the ingredients, simplicity, and not seeking perfection. That ties in with that, doesn't it?
Right. Because you can you should always be trying to improve. You should always be trying to, thinking about what you're doing and learning about it and learning from your mistakes and learning from your successes. But the idea that you're going to eventually arrive at some place where you have some kind of platonic ideal of a dish, I think that would be, that would be sad.
I agree.
Because then you would stop learning.
And you, am I right in thinking like you prefer cooking at home than going out? Like
oh, absolutely.
People might be surprised, might think, oh, food editor, you're out all the time, but that's your thing, isn't it? It's about home cooking.
Yes. I'm definitely. I wrote 2 cookbooks. My thing has always been, it's the old Peace Corps thing that you can take give a man a fish and you fed him for a day, teach him to fish and you fed him for a life. My idea is, tell somebody about a great restaurant, you've given them one great meal, teach them to cook something, you've set them up for the rest of their lives. And that's always been that's always been the person that I've been writing to, was the person who really wanted to cook at home. And and there's a lot that we can learn from restaurant cooking, and there's, but to try and to assume that that should be the goal of every home cook, I think is really, really wrong. I mean, and when you think about it, at least from during the time when I was learning to cook, when you talk to great chefs, the person who always inspired them most wasn't another great chef; it was their moms.
Exactly.
So I think when you have a food culture that is based on the restaurant, you're missing that crucial foundation of kind of like a sense of shared taste.
There's a push now in Ireland for by some people, by a lot of chefs and stuff, about teaching cooking in school. And I another article you did about your daughter or your granddaughter in Waterford, teaching her to cook. And I think that's such an important thing, isn't it? That it should be part of school.
It should be part of school, and it should be part of every household. And I understand, when you've got both parents working, and dinner is often an ordeal. Just getting people fed is an accomplishment. But when you have time, I think it's important to bring kids into the kitchen, and even if it's not set up like in an instructional format, okay, here's what we're doing and here's why we're doing it. Let them see you enjoying yourself in the kitchen. That's an important lesson. That's lesson number 1, that the kitchen is a place where you can relax and you can enjoy yourself and you can be creative, rather than it's a place of drudgery. For me, and I acknowledge that this isn't true for everybody. It's not true for my wife, but for me, cooking dinner is not the same as doing the laundry. It's not like an obligation that you just kind of get out of the way. It's something it's an important part of my day. Especially under lockdown, it's like the only important part of my day.
Yeah, exactly.
Wake up thinking, what am I going to do for dinner now, huh?
Exactly. And actually, one of my first memories of my mother is her baking bread. And the funny thing is, I don't ever remember baking bread after that. But my first memory is being beside her in the kitchen baking bread.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, there's something the smells of that and the sounds of that are so. They're so deeply, the bread in the bone, I guess is what you could say.
Exactly. So your next one, I can't even pronounce it. And it's the first time ever there's been a location that I had no idea where it was.
So, is that Mendocino?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so Mendocino. Yeah, Mendocino is in Northern California. It's north of San Francisco. An hour and a half north of San Francisco. So, California is a huge state. To drive from Los Angeles to San Francisco is about 7 hours. And then you go another hour and a half north of that, and there's Mendocino. It's on the coast with mountains right behind it. For me, Mendocino represents what California used to be like, and what the kind of dream of California is. There's fantastic wineries. There are all kinds. There's wonderful cheesemakers. There's great fishing. Commercial fishing. There's still like lots of wild salmon up there, or there used to be, anyways. And it's a place of incredible natural beauty. A place where you think of the Cliffs of Moher and Mendocino, the coastline is like that, and isolated beaches where you can be on the beach and you can look up and down the beach. It's usually shingle beaches. You can look up and down the beach and for 10 miles in either direction, and there's nobody there. It's very much like Ireland in that way. Great natural beauty, and just the kind of the day-to-day pleasures of life, rather than kind of the peak experience of going to New York or going to San Francisco or Napa Valley.
Yeah, because sometimes I suppose when Irish people think about California, we kind of just think of it as one place, but there's a huge variety in the place.
Oh, there's a huge variety of places in California. I really realized that when my daughter went to college close to the California-Oregon border, and that was another 2 hours north of Mendocino. So it's like it was a 2-day drive to get from Los Angeles, which isn't even the southern extreme of California. So there's an incredible variety of landscapes and cultures in California.
And then the next place on your list then is the opposite, you could say, in a way, Los Angeles. And you say it's misunderstood.
Yeah. Yes. It took me a couple of years before I realized, because Los Angeles is set up as a tourist attraction. It's very easy to go to Los Angeles and spend a week and do the designated things. Go to Disneyland, take a Hollywood tour, do this, do that. None of those things appeal to me. None of them. When my daughter was young, we had to go to Disneyland, so we went to Disneyland a couple times. But for me, the really wonderful things about Los Angeles and about living in Los Angeles are kind of the hidden out of the way places. There's a rocky outcrop called the Palos Verdes Peninsula that's just unbelievably beautiful, and there's almost never anybody. By Los Angeles standards, not very many people there. There's a place where you can sit on the top of the cliff, and there's actually a whale watch station, and you can watch the whales going by. And whale watching, and it would be another thing that I would suggest that every tourist in Los Angeles do. You're in this intense urban area. Los Angeles County, there's 9 million people. There's more people in Los Angeles County than there are in all of Ireland. And you get, you're 40 minutes out and you're in the middle of the ocean, and there's whales, like tons of whales. There's tons of dolphins. There's all of this natural life, Another place is the place called Bolsa Chica Nature Reserve, which is great bird watching, just a kind of a calm place to go and walk. If you want to do the Hollywood thing, I would suggest the Hollywood Farmers Market on Sundays is amazing. Farmers markets in California are very different than here. California is a major agricultural state. Everybody talks about the movie industry, but more than half of all of the fruits and vegetables that are grown in the United States are grown in California, and they're all grown within 3 hours of most of them are grown within 3 hours of Los Angeles. So farmers bring down their produce. Well, the Hollywood Farmers Market is set up. It's right off of Hollywood Boulevard, so you're in that old, that old grunge, the mixture of grunge and spectacle that everybody expects from Hollywood. But there's amazing, just absolutely amazing produce, and it probably covers 2 or 3 acres. And the people the people watching is the real thing, because there's everything from there are a lot of chefs who go and all of that kind of stuff. And then there'll be like celebrities, and the celebrities are all dressed down. You know, they'll wear baseball caps real low, and they'll have sunglasses on or a hoodie or something like that. And then because it's Hollywood, there will be, you know, like the most flamboyant drag queens that you've ever seen, you know, like 7 feet tall on roller skates, and they're just rolling through. And so it's that real, you get a real sense of kind of the weirdness of that's celebrated in Los Angeles as well.
So your next spot, Gascony, France. Where is that? What area is it?
Gascony's fairly, it's in the Southwest. And that's a fairly recent discovery for me within the last 3 or 4 years. My experience of France had been basically, you know, the tourist experience of Paris, and I liked it, and it was great fun, but it didn't kind of speak to me on that deeper level. But we have some friends. We have a friend who moved from California to this little town, a little town in Gascony. And we went to visit her, and it was a reconnection with that kind of with deep France, you know, of what I think of as deep France. Where again, it was almost Italian in the approach to food. That boy, they do a lot of every part of the duck that you can imagine except for the quack. You know, things are the food is fairly straightforward. It's not overly intellectualized. It's not overly complicated, but it's got that real immediate, you know, visceral deliciousness. It's, I guess, you know, it's the idea of every day there ought to be some beauty in your life, you know, and I really love I love that. Gascony is where the Three Musketeers came from. And it's you know, and it's resolutely old-fashioned. It's a terrific agricultural area, and you know, and they do. It's like Ireland in that the natural ingredients are very good. They do more elaboration there. So, you know, great, you know, pâtés and sausages and things like that. So, you know, kind of taking it up a little bit. And also it's a warmer climate. And so they have, you know, it's much more friendly to growing fruits and vegetables than Ireland is.
And Bordeaux is part of that region, isn't it? Am I right in saying that? Is it?
It's not part of the region, but it's adjacent to it.
Okay.
And the Pyrenees are fairly adjacent to it as well. And the Dordogne.
I presume in Gascony that the Bordeaux, the wines have an influence.
The grapes are the same, but it's still very proudly Gasconnaise, where if you go to a big deal restaurant, there will be Bordeaux on the list, but there will also be a lot of local wines. So they're still very, very centered on their local cuisines and the local culture.
When you're in a region, when you're in a place, the wines always taste better, don't they?
They do. And for some reason, sometimes it doesn't travel well. You know, I think there are international styles of wine that people have adapted to. So you know, you taste Cabernet in California, it tastes much like a Cabernet from Bordeaux or a Merlot from California, Merlot from Bordeaux. But what really interests me are those the little indigenous grape varieties, or even the individual the local expressions from familiar grapes. So what they do with Cabernet, with Merlot in the southwest of France is a little bit different than what they do with it in Bordeaux.
I mentioned to you, like, I was in Santiago and I went to the markets. I love doing that, going to the markets whenever I'm away. And I'm sure you're the same, that my guess is you'll always go to the market to see what
markets
the produce
are museums.
Yeah.
There are art museums for people like you and I.
You said the best strawberry, Mara de Bois, is from Gascony. Am I right in saying that?
I don't know that they are the. I've learned never to say the best.
Yeah.
But, the best that I've had. They're among the best that I've had.
That's a good line.
They have there's almost like I mean, they taste. It's a strawberry, so it tastes like a strawberry. It's silly, but there's almost like an overtone of violets. There's a flowery quality to it that's just compelling.
And how does that
compare? And of course, I love my Wexford strawberries too.
you just took the words out of my mouth. I was just going to say, how do they compare to the Wexford strawberries? So you moved to Waterford because your daughter and son-in-law, you followed them to Ireland, and
Right. Well, we came the first time 5 years ago or 6 years ago, right when they'd first moved. We came during the summer, and no, actually it was a late summer, early fall, and we came on our way to visiting friends in France and in Italy. We were going both places, and thought, oh well, we'll stop in. And at the end of the week, we thought, we kind of like this, we like this. And so the next year we came, and we spent 2 years. I mean, sorry, we spent 2 weeks, and then we kept coming and spending a little bit longer each time. Then I guess 3 years ago we came for the summer. We rented a house from a friend and stayed for 2 months. And at that point, we really we really started thinking about relocating for a longer period of time. And we really, it ticks all of the boxes, as they say. I'm a real history buff, and Waterford has got such spectacular history right at our doorstep. I mean, 15 minutes from my house is the oldest public building in Ireland. Reginald's Tower. There's 5 really fantastic history museums here. They're so smart and so well put together. They're still 11th and 12th century walls that you walk through on your way to Tesco. That kind of juxtaposition, I really love. I love being able to walk everywhere. My daughter's house is 5 minutes from our house. My pub is 10 minutes. Downtown center is 15 minutes. So we go days and days without even getting in the car. I've got my little circuit that I do on Saturday mornings of going to the bookstore and picking up bread and picking up cheese and picking up coffee. And I think most of all, and you hear it so often that it's a cliche, but I just find the people are so welcoming and so friendly. My local is if I can give it a plug, because they need it now, is Phil Grimes Pub, which is a great pub. He's got a great selection of beers from all over the world. He's got a great selection of ciders. He's got really good Irish whiskey selection. But the people are so amazing. And when the first time we came, our first 3 visits were obviously before the pandemic, so we could actually like hang out at the bar. And Tom Ryan, who's the proprietor, he's got that magic publican's way of saying, "Oh, you would like this person," and introducing you in a way that starts a conversation. And within the first week of being here, I felt like I belonged. And I would walk in, and people would say hi. We came back the second time, and everybody said, "Oh, hey, Russ, how are you?" Like I'd been like they hadn't seen me for a week or something. It had been a year in between. So we found the people in Ireland to be so welcoming and so friendly, and that it's so different from Los Angeles. We have great friends in Los Angeles, but in Los Angeles, it takes a while for people to open up. In Ireland, we found that people are just open armed from the very beginning.
And I love what you're saying about the Irish pub, because sometimes it's forgotten a little bit, as you said, pubs. It's, like I think on Lonely Planet, it's the #1 thing that tourists want to see when they come to Ireland. It's such a part of our culture. And it's such a great, I always say, like, go to a pub, particularly if there's a trad music section on, go into that pub, just sit down near the band, and all you have to do is say to someone going, "That's great, isn't it?" And that's the conversation started.
Yeah. Or you could just say, "Oh, lovely weather we're having, isn't it?" And that'll be, there's 20 minutes right there.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the difference between pubs in Ireland and bars in America, and I've worked in bars when I was in college. Bars are almost like dispensaries, where people go and they get their drinks. They go there to drink.
Okay.
In a pub, people go to talk.
Totally.
And they serve beer. They serve drinks, but it's not. I think for most people, that's not the reason that you go. The reason that you go is to see people. It's an extension of your living room, an extension of it's where friends meet, rather than I'm going to go and take my medicine.
Exactly. And you can talk about any. Do you find Irish people, do we talk about food? Are we not as interested in food, or have you noticed that, or are we?
I think there's I don't know that you can generalize. I think that there are people who are very interested in food, and there's people who are very, very knowledgeable about food and who have traveled quite a bit. And then there are people who, like food is kind of the thing now, right? It's a cliche in America, food's the new rock and roll. And so there are people who just want to be able to talk about food. And then there are people who kind of just, take food for granted and just like what they like. And I find that to be kind of more refreshing. I hope this doesn't come across wrong, but I think we're in Ireland at an early stage in developing a food scene. I think there are parallels between Ireland today and where California was maybe 20 years ago. And mostly that has to do with moving from the kind of restaurant that from the burger, pizza, kebab kind of like give people what they want, to trying something that's a little bit different, and that's really Irish. I love J.P. McMahon's book. There's a very fundamental restaurant in California called Chez Panisse, which was kind of the birthplace of all of the California cuisine. And that book strikes me a lot the same way, where he's taking traditional techniques and traditional ingredients and just elevating them in a way, being a little bit more careful with them maybe, and trying ornamenting them around the edges, not changing the essential of the dish, but kind of putting little twists on it that make you appreciate the dish in a different way. And I think if I had a hope, if I could be bold enough to have a hope for other people's food scene, it would be that's the way things go, rather than trying to imitate food from other places, digging deeper into what we have here. It takes a certain combination of factors before you can have a really great international scene. In Los Angeles, Los Angeles is different than almost any place in the world. In Los Angeles, there's more. People are always pointing out there's more Koreans than there are in any place but Seoul. There's more Persian or Iranians than any place but Baghdad. All of these kinds of, we have huge communities of specific ethnic groups that are very, very demanding. And so you go to an Iranian restaurant in Los Angeles, and most of the people who are there are going to be first generation Iranian, and so the food is very, very good. That's very, very difficult to replicate. There are only so many Iranians that have moved to other places. Even Mexican restaurants or Central American restaurants or Chinese restaurants. In Los Angeles, it's like the thing isn't Chinese. It's like which sub-region of China. And most of the people who will be going to that restaurant will be from that area. So they place different demands on the chef. The chef has to cook to that traditional style rather than trying to figure out what these crazy Americans are going to want from Szechuan cooking, And so I would hope that in Ireland that people would explore deeper into what we have here, rather than looking across at what other people have and trying to adapt it in a way that may or may not fit people's palates.
I agree. One of my favorite things is oysters with, just lemon, and so simple, but you're tasting the sea, the Irish.
Oh, I know. I mean, oysters don't even get me started. People sometimes ask me that, it's like, what's the greatest meal you've ever had? I've been really lucky, been able to eat in some really great restaurants, and Michelin 3-star restaurants, and work with those people. But the meal that I keep coming back to was one afternoon driving down in Northern California and coming across there was an oyster farm where they just had picnic tables up just above the water, and they had the bags of oysters in the water, and it was cold and it was windy, and it picked up the scent of the water, and the scent of the water was exactly the scent of the oyster and the flavor of the oyster. So you were like surrounded by this oyster flavor. And I'm a sucker for oysters anyways. They're like one of my favorite foods. But to be able to be so kind of surrounded by it was a total sensual experience, because everything was focused on the taste and on the smell. And I've never had a meal greater than that.
So I forgot to say it actually, is my last question that I ask people: if you close your eyes and take 4 deep breaths, where is your happy place and why? Like, I always find anyway, to cover myself, that the first thought that comes into your head is the right one. It could be anywhere in the world or anything.
My happy place is not necessarily a location, but it's a feeling.
Yeah.
And so I would say it would be, like, if I had to be specific about a location, it would be either on my back porch here, looking out over, we've got a lovely house and a wonderful view clear to the Comoros. In the summertime, looking out over that, or being home in Long Beach, and we've got because of the weather there, we eat dinner outdoors 6 or 7 months out of the year. And we've got an arbor of bougainvillea that's always really beautiful, and having friends and family around the table in either of those places. But for me, the key is having friends and family around the table. We've been to Clonmel twice. The favorite place that we found in Clonmel was the St. Patrick's Well.
Yeah, that is magical.
It's so essentially Irish, and it's just like there's not a parking spot even. It's like a wide place in the road, and then you walk down you're in this absolutely gorgeous, magical, peaceful place. I mean, both times we've been there, there have been people with big jugs filling up drinking water.
So thank you so much. I could talk to you forever.
It was a great conversation.
I would ask if you could please subscribe to Apple Podcast, so a new episode will appear in your library every week. I would also really appreciate if you could leave a rating and a review, as it helps others to discover this podcast. To find out who's on every Tuesday, please follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Travel Tales with Fergal. Stay safe and keep dreaming of future travels.
Travel Tales with Fergal.